But after resettling in South Korea, they receive a great deal of support. However, receiving repetitive support nudged some people's consciousness and made them feel uncomfortable. Because I lack things and I'm not self-sufficient enough, I want to receive help. But after receiving help, I feel shame. I'm less motivated to work because I'm spoiled with help from here and there.
탈북한 부모님을 둔 학생들은 어떤 삶을 살고 있을까요? 그리고 어떤 어려움들을 겪고 있을까요? 먼저 온 통일이라 불리는 사람들이 있습니다. 북한이탈주민입니다. 북한이탈주민을 부르는 명칭도 시기에 따라 바뀌었습니다. 탈북자, 세터민, 현재는 북한이탈주민 대신 북향민이 논의됩니다. 34,000여 명으로 집계된 이들은 북한에서 고난의 행군이 진행된 1990년대부터 꾸준히 한국으로 유입되는 중입니다. 북한이탈주민이 한국 사회에서 어떻게 하면 잘 적응할 수 있는지 고민해온 존스홉킨스 대학교 메디컬 스쿨의 박소임 박사는 사회적 관계가 매우 중요하며 핵심적인 품성으로 상호주의에 기반을 둔 호혜성을 주장합니다. 상호주의, 무언가를 누군가에게 받으면 이를 당연하게 생각하기보다 나누고 베푸는 기브앤 테이크가 가능할 때 북한이탈주민 당사자의 삶도 나아질 수 있다는 논의는 북한이탈주민 지원 정책의 물질적인 부분 외에도 정서적인 부분이 필요하다는 점을 시사합니다.
Today, we hosting Dr. Soim Park, a senior scientist at Johns-Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She is going to make a presentation on social support in North Korean refugees adaptation in South Korea. Dr. Park, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Dr. Peck. Thank you for inviting me to present on the role of social support in the adaptation of North Korean refugees. I wanted to share a little bit about my background before we dive into the topic. I began my medical practice as a Korean medicine doctor, 한의사 in Korean, in 2011. After graduating from college, I completed an internship and residency at the National Medical Center in Seoul. The National Medical Center is a government-owned medical institution where many North Korean refugees seek medical treatment. This was my first interaction with this population, and at that time, I had very limited knowledge about North Korean refugees. Typically, a medical consultation begins with identifying the chief complaints and determining when and how the symptoms started. In consultations with North Korean refugees, they often shared their migration experiences, describing how they lived in North Korea, how they lived in China, and how they migrated to South via many countries. Like many South Koreans, I was not familiar with these stories, so I pursued a master's degree at the University of North Korean Studies to better understand this population. My experiences with North Korean refugees transformed my entire career path, shifting my focus from improving individual health from a clinical perspective to enhancing the health of marginalized populations through a public health approach. So I completed my doctoral degree at the Johns-Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in 2021, and I'm currently working as a junior faculty member at the same school. So refugees are more likely to experience mental health problems such as depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicide attempts. Obviously, poor mental health leads to difficulties in adaptation among refugees. What causes poor mental health? Studies suggest that traumatic experiences before or during migration can lead to mental health problems. North Korean refugees may have experienced trauma when they were in North Korea. Some examples of such trauma include religious persecution, physical abuse, rape, and imprisonment. In one study where I conducted secondary data analysis, the research team compiled a list of 39 traumatic events that North Korean refugees may have experienced or have heard of in North Korea. They recruited about 300 North Korean refugees and asked whether they had personally experienced those events. For example, if an individual was imprisoned by themselves, we would consider that as experiencing one direct trauma. On average, individuals reported experiencing 1.2 events directly in North Korea. In contrast, if they report hearing that someone in the neighborhood was raped and witnessing a public execution in North Korea, we count that they were exposed to 2 instances of indirect trauma. On average, the study population experienced 3 indirect trauma events. These average numbers may seem very small, like 1 or 2 or 3, but for many non-refugee populations, the score would be nearly 0. Exposure to direct or indirect trauma in North Korea can result in poor mental health even after 2 or 3 decades of living in South Korea. In other words, the impact can be long-lasting and pervasive. This is not the end, although we won't have enough time to discuss the trauma experienced during migration in detail. Many North Korean refugees who hide within local communities in China endure various forms of trauma, including fears of deportation and intimate partner violence experienced by trafficked women, among others. Experiencing trauma can lead to post-traumatic stress symptoms, commonly referred to as, in the y-axis, PTSS. Constantly experiencing symptoms such as negative mood changes, repetitive intrusive memories, or nightmares or flashbacks can significantly increase the risk of developing more severe mental health problems. We discussed indirect trauma in the previous slide. In this figure, we can see a positive association between the number of indirect trauma events and PTSS. This graph shows that individuals who had witnessed or heard of traumatic events, excluding direct exposure, exhibit higher levels of PTSS. However, there is a factor that moderates the magnitude of the association, which is acculturative stress. Acculturative stress refers to the various psychological stresses that individuals experience when adjusting to a new culture. As you can see from the red line, individuals with high levels of acculturative stress who find adjustment in South Korea very stressful, they tend to exhibit higher PTSS scores as they experience more of the indirect trauma. In contrast, for individuals with low levels of acculturative stress, the slope of the PTSS scores decreases. Now, experiencing indirect trauma is unchangeable. It's an inevitable condition they already experienced. You cannot change their post-traumatic experiences. But acculturative stress is happening now, so it is modifiable. To improve the mental health of North Korean refugees, reducing their acculturative stress can be the way to improve their mental health. Then what types of acculturative stress do North Korean refugees experience? I conducted a qualitative study in 2019 with 30 North Korean refugees and 20 South Koreans to understand the social interactions in these 2 groups. Within the box in the center, we can see the type of acculturative stress reported by North Korean refugees. Here up here, culture shock caused by different communication styles or social norms is a significant source of acculturative stress. As these individuals often come to South Korea alone, here loneliness or social isolation, these contribute to acculturative stress. Many people, especially those who have left loved ones in North Korea, feel guilty about living in comfort while their remaining family members in North Korea struggle to survive. Although social discrimination against North Koreans has decreased over the years, they still feel socially discriminated, which they believe contributes to difficulties in finding jobs. Many North Korean refugees sought to overcome acculturative stress by exchanging social support with family, friends, and neighbors. Of course, not all acculturative stress can be alleviated through social support. However, receiving emotional appraisal or instrumental support helps reduce acculturative stress. Because North Korean refugees are often viewed as a vulnerable population, we believe it is natural for them to receive support from the South Korean government, organizations, or individuals. This support will be essential to their adjustment. It is also natural for North Korean refugees who settled earlier to help newcomers from North Korea. However, I found this blue part very interesting. We often assume that the interaction between South Koreans and North Korean refugees is unidirectional, with assistance flowing from South Koreans to North Korean refugees. But many South Koreans also reported receiving social support from North Korean refugees. The most common types of support that South Koreans provide to North Korean refugees were often emotional or appraisal support. For example, this quote says, in the blue box, "I'm inspired so much when I see that North Korean refugees continue to live bravely after the difficulties they experienced, talk about their past humorously, or try to help other North Korean refugees." This young South Korean woman reported feeling inspired by the passion, bravery, and positivity of North Korean refugees. So my research evolved to focus on the bidirectional support exchange between South Koreans and North Korean refugees. This framework was developed based on the qualitative data. In the top box here, North Korean refugees in human nature adhere to more norms of reciprocity, as illustrated by the proverb, I think this is North Korean proverb, "Receiving is repaying." In North Korea, they learned that when you receive something, you're expected to give something in return. This is a universal moral norm. But after resettling in South Korea, they receive a great deal of support. However, receiving repetitive support nudged some people's consciousness and made them feel uncomfortable. As we can see in this quote, "Receiving help sometimes bring uneasiness because I was born as an independent human with enough capacity to manage my life. But why should I always receive help? Because I lack things and I'm not self-sufficient enough, I want to receive help. But after receiving help, I feel shame. I'm less motivated to work because I'm spoiled with help from here and there." Another similar quote here says, "It could be my guilty conscience, but getting government assistance makes it so hard to ask South Koreans for help. Regardless of what South Korean individuals do to help North Koreans, they might think that we are unhelpful for them. That's why I can't ask others for help even if I really need it." These uncomfortable feelings make some North Korean refugees more independent. This sense of independence was often heightened when they realized that North Korean refugees are not the only individuals who suffer in South Korea. This is illustrated in this quote from a young North Korean man. "I used to take help for granted, thinking I'm new to the South, I have nothing. During my third year in South Korea, I lost my business and started doing construction work. There, I had a chance to talk to some South Korean co-workers and got to know that there are so many South Koreans who have a tough life. After I recovered from financial difficulties, I started to volunteer in associations for the disabled and in senior centers." We see that realizing there are South Koreans in the same boat as himself was a significant turning point in practicing reciprocity. Echoing these quotes, South Koreans also reported that North Korean refugees who understand and reciprocate what they have received tend to achieve successful adaptation in South Korea. Here, reciprocity does not have to be strictly a one-to-one ratio. It does not mean that if you receive rice, you must repay with rice. It can involve like showing gratitude for what was received, giving small items in return for larger ones, or even giving something to a third person instead of the original giver. Some North Korean refugees tend to reciprocate towards South Koreans, while others do not. There may be various factors contributing to this distinction. It could be due to personal characteristics, lived experiences, or differing levels of resilience. But one common factor was that North Korean refugees who were sensitive to reciprocity were those who had met diverse South Koreans and engaged in various social interactions with them. This figure illustrates the participant recruitment process in the previous two qualitative study. A total of 30 North Korean refugees participated in the study, represented in blue. At the end of the interview, we asked participants to refer any North Korean refugees or South Koreans in their network for potential study participation. As you can see, only 3 North Korean refugees, I think it's participant number 19, 20, 5 and 27, and they referred South Koreans. Study referral has a different meaning from social network, but it still conveys something. We can think that only a small number of North Korean refugees have close relationship and close social interactions with South Koreans. There are numerous research articles, newspaper articles, and reports related to the mental health of North Korean refugees. The main discourse is that they are vulnerable to mental health issues. Based on my 5 years of clinical experience, this stereotype also persists in the hospital settings. Then how do North Korean refugees perceive themselves? This quote is from my previous research conducted more than 10 years ago, which truly changed my perspective on approaching the health of marginalized population. This 49-year-old woman says like this: "We North Koreans are tough-minded, much like the cold weather up north. We have no idea, you have no idea how strong-willed we are. We came all the way here just to survive. So what could we possibly be unable to do? We are incredibly mentally strong. We've seen and experienced so much just to get here. So no matter how hard it is, we can endure." This quote made me reflect on how to make the most of what one has rather than focusing on what is lacking. To enhance the social adaptation of North Korean refugees, which is closely related to their mental health, community and family support for this population should be strengthened. This can be achieved by expanding and strengthening social support, developing constructive coping strategies, or engaging in livelihood activities. The host community should also think about how they can help North Korean refugees improve social support. Also, utilizing an asset-based approach, focusing on what their strength rather than their weaknesses or vulnerabilities would help in developing interventions and policies that are beneficial for North Korean refugees. This is all I have prepared for the presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so it's neighbors, South Korean neighbors. Of course, it's North Korean refugees who become as soon as they got here in South Korea, they get the citizenship of Republic of Korea. This is pretty rare for the refugees, right?
True.
And that actually entitle them to be a citizen as well as quite a financial and other support from the government. Okay, but that's not enough. They need to be very proactive. Sometimes very aggressive, to get mingled with, South Korean, just adapting themselves to society. And then, but still, we think in the role of government, of course, church and then religious groups, they are doing their best, to help them out, to make for them to be a successful, individual citizen in South Korea and probably the other part of the world. But what is the role of government here? Is for especially improving their mental health. So you say reciprocity. When they come, the government institute must educate more like civic education to be a very successful democratic citizen and a very independent autonomous citizen in South Korea. Or what's the deal from the South Korean government point of view?
I think it's very hard.
Hard.
It's very hard.
You can educate them. No.
Yeah, and I think again, I'm not the best positioned as a policy recommendation in this aspect, but so I went to New Malden in the UK during my doctoral course because I know Dr. Ji Young-sung was a speaker of this lecture.
Sure. Last year.
Last year. I read her article and was very interested in this population in New Malden. So I went there and spent some time in the community. I think it was 2016 or 17. And one thing I was very intrigued about the government's role was that I felt like, I don't know, I didn't compare the policy one-to-one, but I felt like what they described was that UK government required more of the independence. So there were maybe less support, so which may be very difficult for some of the people who really need support. But and maybe the population there is younger, so they sought new opportunity like pioneers. So they are relatively younger than the North Korean refugees in South Korea. So That can be the difference, but these populations were required to stand alone earlier than North Korean refugees in South Korea. So I thought that made them, adjust to the society easier compared to North Korean refugees in South Korea. And what North Korean refugees in South Korea are getting is that, so they get the government assistance. If they get more than, or it's very easy to get rid of this government assistance, even though they make very small amount of money. So it's like all or none, or all none. So if they get all the assistance, or if they work a little bit, then they get none. So I thought that was kind of demotivating for some people to start work and get into the society with barefoot. That start movement was a little bit of demotivating for North Korean refugees in South Korea. So this balance, that government should, find out where the balancing point is. But yeah, this balance is important, I guess.
Very, very delicate task, for the government officials.
Yeah.
All right, I see. So yeah, I mean, according to your suggestion and proposals for the South Korean government, and then we actually have hosted one of the most very rare successful North Korean refugees, who settled in when she was pretty young. She's now doing PhD in the University of California, Riverside. And what she told us in this series, of course, is she made a huge effort, hard work all the time. She was lucky, she said, she's lucky to have a pretty good and a very kind and equal treating classmates and neighbors. But what she said is that she's working very, very hard all the time.
Yeah.
So that actually depends on the individual efforts too. Of course, in governmental and then institutional support, really matters. And then the other, the neighbors, from their hosting society, of course, matters. Their attitude matters. But the most important, region, for them to be successful in the research society is their hard work. And then that's tightly related to, mental health. If you have depression and you have, suffering from the PTSD, you just mentioned, they say you average it 3 times of 3 cases of PTSD in comparison to more like zero for the say normal society in people. So it's pretty important for government and then other institutions to say help them to overcome the mental health issues in the research society. Okay. Thank you for your excellent presentation and then very intriguing explanation and share with us today. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
지난 Now in North Korea 시즌 1에서 호주 국립대 송지영 교수는 한국에 거주하는 북한 이탈 주민이 종종 남한에서 이류 시민으로 대우받는 것을 거북해하고 자녀 교육을 위해 제3국으로 향하는 경우가 있다고 이야기했습니다. 한국 생활에 적응하지 못해 북한으로 다시 향하거나 다른 국가로 이동하는 현상을 탈남 현상이라고도 합니다. 박소임 박사의 논의는 북한 이탈 주민에게 먼저 온 통일이라고 추켜 세우기보다는 이들 스스로 사회적인 기술을 발전시킬 수 있도록 여러 제도적, 비제도적 도움이 필요하다는 것을 의미합니다.